Everyone, welcome back to ACE exams. This is Maath Alabdali, and today I'll be explaining the water molecules. I'll also be explaining the structure of the water molecules, as well as the properties of the water molecules. And yeah, so let's start. So, water is very important. Inside every single cell of the human body, 80% of it is basically water. And water has many functions in the human body. So, first of all, water is a metabolite, which means that um, is involved in any metabolic reaction, including hydrolysis and condensation, which I'm going to go through in the next slide. Metabolite, it is a substance that is involved in the metabolic reaction. So I'm going to go into much detail later on in the video. So the second function is that water helps with temperature control because it has a high specific heat capacity and it has a high latent heat of vaporization, which I'm also going to go through in detail in the next slides. Water acts also as a universal solvent, so some substances dissolve in water. So yeah, one more function is that water molecules are very cohesive, so they stick together, which help the water transport in plants as well as the transport in other organisms. So, let me just before I start talking about the properties of water, I'm just going to talk about the simple structure of water. So, water is covalently bonded. It's a covalent bond between hydrogen atoms and the oxygen atoms. So a molecule of water is made up of one atom, one oxygen atom, joined by two atoms of hydrogen by shared electrons. Now, because the shared negative hydrogen electrons are pulled toward the oxygen atom because it's a big atom, the other side of the atom, this side of the atom, it's left with a slight positive charge. So this side of the atom is basically negative, and this side of the atom is positive. And the unshared negative electron on the oxygen atom give it a slight negative charge. So that's why on this side it's mostly negative, and this side it is positive. This makes the water molecule a polar molecule, so it has a partial negative charge and it has a partial positive charge. So sometimes the slightly negative charge of the oxygen atom it gets attracted to the slightly positive charge of hydrogen atom of another water molecules. So in this diagram we have a water molecule in here, and then we have a water molecule here. So the oxygen atom, the negative charge of the oxygen atom get attracted to the partial positive charge of the hydrogen atom, and this is what the bonding between the hydrogen and the oxygen is what we call the hydrogen bonding, and it gives water some of its useful properties, which I'm going to go through in the next slide. So water's useful properties. The first property of water is that water is an important metabolite. So water is both involved in hydrolysis reaction and in condensation reaction. So a hydrolysis reaction requires a molecule of water to break a bond, while the condensation reaction, it releases a molecule of water as a new bond is formed. So the way I remember this is that hydrolysis starts with hydro, and then water, it has hydrogen. So there's like hydro and hydro. So hydrolysis requires water. It requires hydrogen and oxygen in water. So that's how I remember it. So hydrolysis, it requires a molecule of water, and then condensation, it releases a molecule of water. The way opposite. So the second property of water is that water has a high latent heat of vaporization. So lots of energy is needed to break the hydrogen bond between the water molecules. So this is useful for living organisms because this means that they can use water loss through evaporation to cool down without losing too much water. So example, human sweat to cool down. So when we sweat, water is released on our skin, and then uh, uh, heat energy it heat energy from the sun evaporates the water, but by the time water evaporates we are already cooled down, so we do not lose too much water. The third property of water is that water can buffer changes in temperature. So the hydrogen bond between water can absorb lots of energy. So this means that the water has high specific heat capacity, as lots of energy is required to break it down. And this is useful for living organisms because water does not experience rapid temperature change. So this makes water a good habitat because temperature underwater is likely to be more stable than on land. So basically, the water inside the organisms, inside us, it remain at a fairly stable temperature. So it helps us maintain a constant internal body temperature. So yeah. The fourth property of water is that water is a good solvent. So lots of substances in the metabolic reaction are ionic. So there's a diagram in here. The positive ion, so in here we have an example of sodium chloride. So the positive ion of sodium get attracted towards the negative end of the water, which is the oxygen, the negative end of the water, and then the negative ion, which is in this case chlorine, it get attracted to the positive end of water, so the hydrogen, because hydrogen is positive and then oxygen is negative, and then the ions will be totally surrounded by water and then they dissolve. That's why water is a good solvent. And then water is also, it has also strong cohesion between, there's strong cohesion between the water molecules. So cohesion, it's the attraction between molecules of the same type. And then there's adhesion, which is the attraction between molecule of different types. So the reason why water is cohesive because it is polar. So strong cohesion help water to flow, making it great for transporting substances. And this is how water travel in column up in the xylem cells in plants. And this also means that water has a high surface tension. So when it comes in contact with air, it has a high surface tension, and that is the reason why sweat form droplets which evaporate from the skull to form to cool an organism down, which I talked about in the previous slide. And it's also the reason why pond skaters can walk on the surface of the pond, because water is cohesive, so it has high surface tension. And thank you very much for listening. See you in the next video. Do not forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and follow us on Instagram, ace.exams. Thank you. Bye.